Hey everybody, today I am obviously outside on a winter day in Indianapolis, and this video here is all about, if you're moving to Indianapolis, can you expect snow whenever you get here in the winter? And the answer, the short answer at least, is yeah, obviously. I'm standing out here in the snow, but can you expect it all year long? And what are you gonna expect with the details with that? So we're gonna talk about that in this video, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Indianapolis, or what the winter is like and how much snow we actually get here, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video, each and every week. Now we have people reaching out to us from all over the country with questions about, does it snow in Indianapolis? How much snow do you get? Just generally what it's like to live in or around Indianapolis. So if you have questions at all, then don't hesitate to reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back whenever it comes time for you to make your move to Indianapolis. All right, so in this video, we're gonna talk about snow a little bit, and can you expect snow whenever you're moving to Indianapolis? And yes, you can expect snow, but I talk with people from the Midwest, and so they kind of already know that you can expect snow. But people from places like Southern California or the Deep South, Florida, places like that, it can be a little bit confusing because, you know, a lot of times you see in the news the Midwest getting just completely hammered by snow, or the Northeast with all the nor'easters getting drilled by snow kind of often throughout the winter. Now, we're situated in a place in the country where we're not affected by nor'easters. And honestly, we do get snow, but a lot of our snow looks a little bit like this. This is not deep snow. I mean, you can see in a lot of places where the grass is coming up through the snow. So, you know, there's roughly, depending on actually which side of the street you're on, because the sun on a sunny day will shade some of it and not so much on the other side and melt that a little bit more. But we've got about an inch on the ground right now, which is pretty typical. We here in Indianapolis in the Midwest, we get less snow than what really most people realize. We roughly average about 22 inches of snow per year. And you know, that's really not all that much when you're counting all of December, all of January, all of February. And then we can even get into March, and it can be certainly cold enough at times to snow. By the time you get to the end of March, it's pretty difficult for the weather to produce any snow. Although it has snowed in April before, but it usually doesn't stick around really for more than a day, and we usually don't get that much. But this is very typical. So we'll get maybe an inch or two at a time. And then if we get a big cold snap right after it, it might stick around a little while. And this is a pretty good example here because it's only about 15 degrees outside right now. So it is really cold. My hands are cold, so I got my gloves on. But if it's at all warm, and when I say warm, I mean like 30 degrees, and you get a little bit of sun, the snow melts away really fast. And Indianapolis as a whole, I know there's gonna be a lot of people that don't think this, but if you live in some other places, Indianapolis really does a pretty good job with managing the snow, honestly. And you get into some of the other suburbs, they do the same. So when snow is coming, we know it's coming. And usually the roads are treated, but chemicals down on the roads. So as long as it's not terribly cold, let's say in the 20s or warmer, again, it's a relative thing. So 20s could be considered warm enough for those chemicals, but maybe not for you outside. So when the snow hits the ground, it starts to melt. It starts to melt on those roads really, really fast. And so if it's too much snow, like we get a big whopper, 6 inches or something, then it takes a little bit longer for the chemicals to work, and plus you need to plow that. So it can take some time in the morning to do that. It could take some time in the evening, just depending on when the snow actually falls. If it falls, you know, like at 3 in the morning, or your morning rush hour commute, it's probably gonna be messy. If it falls at noon, 1 o'clock, well, your ride home is probably gonna be pretty messy, but usually it just doesn't last all that long. So about 22 inches on average per year. And if you were to compare that, let's say to a place like Chicago, which you would think is a really, really snowy place, Chicago only gets 36 inches per year. And you know, in my mind, that's not a tremendous amount of snow, but you know, we're talking about a third less than what Chicago gets down here in Indianapolis. So in northern Indiana though, you can get absolutely walloped with snow depending on where you live. If you look at a place like South Bend, where Notre Dame is, Now I'm gonna cross the street here. Even though it's not a busy neighborhood, I wanna make sure I'm looking. South Bend is on the eastern side of Lake Michigan. They can definitely get some lake effect snow, but we're too far south for that. So 22 inches a year, but South Bend is 63 or so inches per year on average. But too far south for that, so we're kind of stuck in this little zone where we just get a little bit of winter weather, but not the most severe. It's pretty interesting, actually, if you look at the I-70 corridor, and I-70, Interstate 70 runs right through Indianapolis. It very oftentimes is where the freezing line is when storm systems move through here. If you go down to Bloomington, which is just to the south of Indianapolis, they get roughly 16 inches of snow a year. And you get right up here at Indianapolis and we're at 22. It just kind of goes to show that once you get south of 70, a lot of times when winter storms move through the area, south of that, they tend to be just more rain or very, very close to that. And you got to go further north to get it just slightly, just marginally colder to where it's snow. And if you get a little further south in Bloomington, it really tapers off. You get down to like Louisville, Kentucky or Evansville, Indiana. Both are along the Ohio River, and they're roughly 9 to 10 inches of snow per year. So that is just not all that much. And you might think in your head, well, that's okay. I really don't want to experience a lot of snow if I'm moving from some place that's really, really warm. And I agree with you. Some of the snow can be really messy. It can be tricky to navigate at times, although honestly, it's just not that bad once you get used to it. It can be pretty as well. I mean, this right here, this looks pretty nice, but if you look over on this side of the road, it's a little bit better. But once you get past that initial snowfall, it starts to get messy. Once it starts to melt, it can get a little dirty, and it just doesn't look nearly as nice as it did as it was falling or after it has just fallen. So it can get a little bit ugly, but our winters in Indianapolis are fairly long. When you get into the late November, it's starting to get pretty cold. All through December, all through January, all through February, it's winter, you know, so we have cold temperatures for sure. But then once you get into March, things start to recover, although our Marches can be pretty raw as well. It can be windy, it can be wet. You know, you can have plenty of days in the 40s and just not really all that comfortable. But given that our winters are very long and we don't get that much snow, it's kind of a bummer. So, you know, if you want to go sledding, you don't have a lot of opportunities through the winter to do that. And amazingly enough, Indianapolis is relatively flat. There's some really great sledding hills. And also things like skiing, you don't really get to do that around here all that often. We do have a couple of ski, I wouldn't call them resorts, but ski places or ski destinations in Indiana, and amazingly they're south of here, where I was just telling you it doesn't really snow all that much at all, but the snow is manufactured. There's a couple that come to mind right now with Paoli Peaks and Perfect North Slopes in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, but they make their own snow, so it's artificial, it's kind of icy after a while, and it's not incredible skiing. So if you're a skier, then you would think, oh man, those places are just, they're kind of not all that good. But if you're a beginner skier or beginner snowboarder, yeah, they're kind of cool to go to, but their drops aren't all that much from the peak. You know, you might be 800 or 900 feet up and it only drops 300 or 400 feet. So the runs are very, very short. You have to get up into Michigan to get maybe a little bit better skiing, but even there, it's not like out west or of course, you know, in Canada, or if you get into the northeastern part of the United States, not as good as all of that. Definitely not. But we do have it. But you have to manufacture the snow because we just don't have snow all year long. You could go to a place like Katawi in Noblesville. They have a really cool tubing hill, and they even have a rope that helps drag you up that. But again, we don't get that much snow, so they have to, for the most part during the year, manufacture their snow as well. So that is kind of the bummer about not getting all that much snow during the winter, because when you're just faced with a lot of really wet, very cold and cloudy days like this, you know, you just kind of really want to get something going outside, and the snow is your best bet, and we just don't get it all that often. And speaking of wet, you know, Indianapolis, we do get rain, of course, throughout the entire year. We get it in the form of thunderstorms and things like that in the summer, but we get really something like 42 inches of rain per year, somewhere in that range, and it's just a little bit above the national average, which is like 38 inches a year or so. So we do get, you know, a decent amount of that sometimes during the winter, and it's just too warm to actually snow. It just depends on, again, where that system is really coming through. And then just speaking of the snow, we're roughly 22 inches a year, and the national average is a little above that. It's like 28 inches or so. So kind of weird when people are thinking or talking to me about Indianapolis and they don't want to deal with snow all winter. We just don't. We just really don't. And honestly, to me, it's a little bit disappointing. I got some young kids. They love playing in the snow. I remember as a kid playing in the snow quite a bit. In fact, when I was a kid, it seemed like we got more snow, although that might just be my perception. I remember some really big snowstorms, like the blizzard of '78. The blizzard of '78, I remember standing out in that, basically waist deep, and that was tremendous. So we don't really get snowstorms like that. That's why, unless we might get 5 or 6 inches here or there, but we don't get snowstorms like that typically, and that's why it's kind of a legend around here, at least for people who are my age in their late 40s and older. Yeah, blizzard of '78, everybody remembers because it was a heck of a lot of snow over the course of a day or two. So it's just not something that's very typical. But if you're worried about the snow at all, or how it's going to affect you in your day-to-day during the winter, or more specific questions, then don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to answer those questions for you. And until the next one, we'll see you later.